The U.S. Supreme Court just began its new term, and one of the first topics it tackled was about abortions in Texas. A lower court ruled that Texas hospitals cannot be required to provide emergency abortions if they break Texas law. Today, the Supreme Court upheld that ruling by declining the Biden administration's appeal.
The state of Texas has one of the most extreme and restrictive anti-abortion laws in the country. And thanks to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals, Texas has essentially acted as if state law trumps federal law. The Biden administration appealed the Fifth Court's decision, and on its very first day of its new term, the Supreme Court refused to hear the Biden administration's appeal, leaving the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision in place. What does that mean exactly? Well, there's something called the Federal Emergency Medicine and Legal Act. This means that under certain circumstances, federal law, when it comes to emergency medical care, overrides whatever the state law might be. So, in the context of abortion, this means that in any state hospital that depends on Medicare funding, which is a federal program, the states must give the kind of care as dictated by the federal government. So, if a woman at any stage of pregnancy needs an emergency abortion in order to save her life, which is illegal in Texas, the federal government says, too bad, you have to provide those services. The Fifth Circuit sided with Texas, and today the Supreme Court, or I should say the corrupt, illegitimate supermajority of the Supreme Court, agreed with the Fifth Circuit and didn't even bother to give a reason for their decision not to take the Biden administration's appeal. So another in a very long series of dark days for women in Texas. Absolutely. And it's also just the shape of things to come. We now know that many other states that have extreme restrictive abortion laws will probably engage in the kinds of conduct Texas is now engaging in. And the Supreme Court is going to let them. I don't know if it's worse exactly, but something that we need to be very, very mindful of. This Supreme Court doesn't care what anybody thinks. Whether the next administration is run by a Democrat or a Republican, the Supreme Court holds itself out as being completely exempt from any control of any other branch of government. There are no circumstances under which this Supreme Court feels that it has to answer to anybody. They're wholly beyond the restraint of their other allegedly co-equal branches of government. The corrupt, illegitimate supermajority on the Supreme Court, run by John Roberts, is anti-constitutional, anti-democratic, and anti-American. And they know that they can get away with anything. And that is not somewhere we want to be if we want to be a better democracy. In fact, this Supreme Court is going to make that impossible. So if nothing else, I hope that this serves as an opportunity for Democrats up and down the ballot to take the issue of Supreme Court reform seriously. We need to add 5 seats, at least, to the Supreme Court yesterday.
Right now, I'm out here to say that we're doing a good job.
So he and others are saying, please, to the former president and to others, stop spreading misinformation because it's hurting people in North Carolina.
It's hard to overstate just how devastating Hurricane Helene was And actually, the consequences of this hurricane were made even worse by Donald Trump's willingness to lie about what was actually going on in terms of the Biden administration response and FEMA's disaster response. It essentially caused people who were in desperate need of government services and help to distrust the very people who were on the ground to help them. I mean, the rescue effort has been extraordinary. And then, of course, there was the fact that Donald went down there twice, diverting desperately needed resources away from search and rescue operations, away from getting aid to the people who most needed it, so he could just, give a rally or hold a press conference, despite having absolutely no official role and no power to do anything to help, other than set up some bogus GoFundMe, which, again, I urge everybody not to donate money to. He also made it very clear in a press conference with Governor Kemp that if Governor Kemp continues to be an ally to Donald Trump, Donald will take care of Georgia if he's back in office. This is the kind of quid pro quo that we know he's very capable of. In fact, we heard recently that during the California wildfires, Donald wanted to withhold funding from victims of those wildfires because California is a blue state. And it wasn't until one of his aides pointed out that Orange County, which is a heavily Republican district, were also affected by the fires, that Donald released emergency funding to help California. We also know that during the Trump administration, when North Carolina was hit by another terrible hurricane, the federal government gave North Carolina only 1% of the aid Governor Roy Cooper requested, very possibly because Roy Cooper is a Democrat. I mean, that is the kind of conduct Donald did engage in and will engage in again, but this time around it's going to be worse. So we now have another massive hurricane. It's already a Category 5 hurricane called Hurricane Milton, just ready to slam into the Gulf Coast of Florida. And then we have people like Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I honestly can't stand even mentioning her. I don't like giving her attention. Like that's her sole purpose in life, is to get attention. But sadly, she's a sitting congresswoman and she does hold influence with a certain number of people. She's been claiming that Democrats are somehow manipulating the weather. Okay, first of all, how, you anti-Semite, are we using our space lasers? The truth of the matter is that it's the Republicans who are manipulating the weather in this way. Every year, hurricanes get worse. Hurricane Helene has been called a once-in-a-generation hurricane. Well, we're about to have another one in the next couple of days. And that's because the climate is heating up, the planet is heating up. And as that happens, as water temperatures rise, hurricanes become more severe. So by doing nothing about climate change, by continuing to increase our use of fossil fuels, by refusing to fund things like wind and solar energy, Republicans are the ones who are making the situation worse. I'm not really sure how many more people need to lose their lives. I'm not really sure how much more property needs to be damaged, but the bill is coming due, and we really need to wrap our heads around this very soon. And it is just one more in the long line of many, many reasons to vote them out of power, because we will not survive them.
That hatred was brought to life on October 7th in 2023. On the sacred Jewish holiday, the terrorist group Hamas unleashed the deadliest day of the Jewish people since the Holocaust.
1 year ago today, Hamas launched a series of coordinated incursions into southern Israel, killing almost 1,200 people and taking 250 others hostage. In the ensuing year, many of those hostages have also been killed, and many of them remain captive by Hamas. Crimes against humanity were committed that day. Many have been committed since. It is a desperate situation, and the region is in increasing turmoil. But today, on that 1 year anniversary, I wanted to remember whom we lost and those we have yet to bring home.